is the Pegasus Podcast, presented by Night Sports Now. UCF news, views, and a few hot takes. Now, here are your hosts, Bailey Go Knights Adams and Christian Charge On Simmons.
Welcome into episode 248. Be sure you're following us on Twitter at BaileyJAdams22, at @ByCASimmons, at Night Sports Now, and at Pegasus Podcast. You can also email us at PegasusPodcast@ksn@gmail.com. Christian, we're not live.
We're not live. I just said to you, we haven't done a non-live, non-emergency podcast in some time. This has been our normal routine for almost 4 years, and now it feels odd to me, but we're back. Very excited.
I didn't have the same sense of dread or anxiety when you're about to hit the record button as I did the last 2 weeks when we were live. We've gotten a lot of positive feedback on the live show, and I'm glad you guys liked it, and we did have fun doing it. It's very stressful to know that there is no safety net, and I can't just say whatever I want and then go fix it later. But we had fun. The live shows were fun. We'll have to. Yeah. Well, I think the massive UCF breaking news has subsided for the time being until I don't even know what could happen. Whatever. A sitting head coach quits to be their DC or something. But I think we're done with that for a little bit. But we'll try to fit in a live show somewhere down the line again because that was fun. Seemed like people had a good time with it. We'll do it at some point. I don't know when, but. I don't know. It kind of need the news cycle to slow down too, but I also want to do another mailbag soon, just because those are fun. Have a good time with those.
We should really test our audience and do a surprise live show, not advertise it in any way, and just throw one up there and see what happens.
No,
I don't know what the point of that would be. It's
I disagree. I disagree.
But at a really weird time too, just 1:30 a.m. on a Thursday. Let's go live and just see who's there to hang out with us.
4 people. I don't know. It's the same people that as soon as you post the audio version of the podcast, it has 10 listens in the first hour. I'm like, what are you people are waiting for? You people, you're waiting for our every word. It's scary to me.
It's a lot more than 10 listens in the first hour, dude. And it's always weird because I post it it depends. I typically post the podcast right before I go to bed, but then sometimes I feel like a lot of people in my generation do this. I'll be like, all right, it's time to go to bed. And then I'm just on my phone for another hour. And then it's always pretty late. And I'm just like, who are you people? You were like it's bedtime and you're like, let's listen to an hour-long podcast about UCF. It shocks me. But
the last thing you listen to before you go to sleep.
I've never thought about it that way. That is, it's they listen to, or maybe the podcast is so boring, it's just a good way to fall asleep. They're just let me throw this on and just
listen.
Get knocked out.
As someone who has trouble falling, well, not trouble falling asleep, but I don't know, trouble sleeping sometimes.
Don't you ever say you have trouble falling asleep? Have we ever talked about this podcast when I shared shocking behavior from you?
I was also very tired.
I don't care. I've never met a human being who can do that. You fell asleep. You were speaking to me and snoring in a 10-second span. A 10-second span. I have never encountered anyone in my life with that ability. So I don't ever want to hear that you can't fall asleep. That is a shocking.
Well, I don't sleep well. That's the way I wanted to phrase it. Is I don't sleep well a lot of times. So maybe I should put on our podcast and it'll help me stay asleep. So I don't have to listen to my voice.
The other thing from that time, because we were on a cruise, so we were in the same room on a cruise ship, was that in the middle of the night, you sneezed and said, bless you to yourself, and then didn't wake up. I'm sitting in bed, you just go, shoot, bless you, and didn't wake up at all.
I don't know. I can't really answer for that. I mean, Quinnen Williams did it once, so he blessed himself and thanked himself. So
that's right.
Good company to be in, I guess. I don't know.
Well, you know who else is being blessed? The transfer portal, thanks to all of UCF's players that are entering it, providing great talent for many other teams.
Did I see a thing today that said there are 317 quarterbacks in the portal?
I believe it.
That's absurd.
I keep waiting for it to cap out because every year you get the headline the first day of the portal that it's they've broken the record for most players in the portal. And they did it again. They did it before lunchtime this year. I keep waiting for the year where the number stops increasing, and it's a double-edged thing. I hope people understand that it's not just, and this isn't really a UCF thing, not with this staff so far, I'm sure it will be eventually. It's not just more players are ready to leave. It's also that schools have become more adept at using the transfer portal as a tool to remove players from their roster. And that wasn't so much a thing the first couple of years. So that's accelerated the number of players going in as well.
Yeah. Which is, I guess, a good place to start our podcast. We're going to talk a little bit about what's sort of a forced roster reset for UCF. And then we'll talk more about the Scott Frost hire, why it maybe will and maybe won't work, just taking different angles on it. But the roster stuff is I guess, maybe the most pressing right now because players just keep leaving and they're slowly adding a couple, but this team is going to look so different next year.
Yeah.
I mean, it always does.
But I mean, I know it always does to a degree, but I mean, this is UCF's first coaching change in the portal era. There's actually a funny thing from when Josh Heupel left. This is how much college football has changed, and Heupel being a bit of a prophet by mistake. Is when, I don't even know if you remember this, when Josh Heupel got hired at Tennessee, he, in his, I don't remember if it was his opening presser or comments that were released or whatever, he made a pledge to not take any players from UCF's roster with him. And at the time I was like, cool, dude, like that's not a thing, but like congrats on just doing what everyone else does. And now that's like what's expected. I mean, you hire a coach with the expectation they're going to bring their stars. So and that was what, 4 years ago? It's just so funny. Not even. It was 3 years ago.
Yeah.
Almost. I mean, well, no, I'm totally wrong. It was 4 years. It was 4 years ago next month. But yeah, I keep forgetting how like when January hits, the calendar changes to a new year. But literally in 4 years, that went from something where I thought it was ridiculous for a coach to even say that, like that's a thing that could occur, to now candidates are hired with the, like a candidate may be picked because they have a good quarterback who is coming with them. Like that's how much things have changed. So yeah. It's going to be an entirely, I mean, it'll be fun to look at next year's roster and see like of 22 starters or however many, how many guys were actually starting for UCF last year. I bet it's going to be a small number. Yeah,
no, it's going to be, it's insane. Like just so some of the names we talked about it, and I at this point in the year, with how quickly everything moves with the portal, I forget which ones we have and haven't talked about, and like which entries happened since our last podcast. I know two of the big ones did. That was Randy Pittman and Lee Hunter, which I guess we could pause to talk about those. Those are the two biggest ones so far.
Yeah. They both surprised me in different ways. Randy Pittman just hurts. That one just flat out hurts. I'd hoped that, I thought he was a portal risk the whole time, whether Gus was going to stay here or not. And when we got through those first few days and it didn't happen, I was like, oh, cool. They held on to Randy. And then it happened. And that's unfortunate because he's obviously, there's a reason he entered the portal. He's highly sought after. You can see the schools that are interested in him. He was clearly is going to be very good. We knew that. You know, he had a great freshman year. He managed to still have a really good sophomore year despite having 4 different quarterbacks, none of whom were ever that great. He's going to be really good. It sucks that UCF lost him. Lee Hunter was a surprise more just because I didn't expect – it weirdly doesn't feel as much of a loss because I never anticipated him being back next year. I was assuming he was going to the draft. But, you know?
Yeah, I guess in hindsight, like I thought he was going to the NFL. But once he entered the portal and was like, I have a year of eligibility left, then I like retroactively got sad. And I was like, oh yeah. No, I was like, if he had one more year, I would have loved for him to stay and do it at UCF. But I mean, that's again another guy who's going to get paid.
Well, that's the thing, and that's why. Which first off, Lee Hunter does hurt. I'm not trying to spin that as that sucks, but I do feel like D-line. I'm still not. That feels like maybe the most solid position group they have right now because as of recording, they still have John Walker, they still have Malachi Lawrence, they still have Nigel Kelly who entered the portal and then came back to UCF. So like that, they've got a solid group there. They still have to add a little bit, but that's not like a disaster or anything like some of the other positions. But yeah, I'm not. Maybe it's just this is my final evolution in this year of college football, but I'm just not finding myself feeling ill will towards these guys. And I mean, if you're going to get paid a bunch of money to go somewhere else, do it. I'd do it. I mean, I feel like you in your day-to-day life, if you're listening to this, you might love your job, you might hate your job, but if you love your job and you think it's great, if some other job came along and was like, we'll double your salary, you're leaving for that job. There's no reality where you're staying at your current job just because you like it. And this added situation, it's also like your current job you love just got a new boss who you know nothing about. And now another job is saying, we'll pay you way more to come here. You do it. So I don't know. I'm still seeing, and I feel like I'm seeing less from UCF fans. I mean, I've seen a few stray comments like you always get, but it's just, this is college football now. It's hard to, trash players leaving UCF when we're also cheering players that UCF's going after and we're excited when they come in. So that's just kind of the world we're in.
And it really is. Like I'm still seeing a little bit of it, not as much like you said, but like just the idea, put yourself in their shoes for a second. Be like, if I'm going to get paid, if I'm going to get offered a lot more money to do the same thing for like, even there's a lot of these guys for 1 year, it's like their last chance to get paid at the college level. Maybe they're going to go in the NFL. Maybe they're not. So why not? Yeah. I mean, they got to do what they got to do. And it does suck for UCF in some cases, but they do benefit from it too. So I don't know. It's losing those two especially hurts. I mean, there's also, Chasen Johnson. I think we had talked about that one maybe last podcast.
I think we knew about Chasen last time.
But since then, he committed to USC and then flipped to SMU. So he's now at SMU.
Which the terminology has changed. That was weird from the start because remember, players can sign now. And like usually the headlines you're getting now is players have signed. So it was weird from the start when it was Chasen has committed to USC. And I'm like, okay, that's where they didn't sign. And then 2 days later, it's like, well, Chasen signed with SMU. So it's like, all right, cool. I don't know what happened there. If USC Was that they wanted him and then didn't want him? I don't know. That I was surprised. It sucks to lose Chasen because usually when someone's playing that much as a true freshman, they're going to project to be very good down the road. But I was surprised that USC got involved so heavily. SMU makes a little more sense to me as far as a landing spot for him.
Yeah, because I mean, he played a lot as a true freshman, and there were certainly, reasons to believe that he's going to blossom into a really good player. But there are also some growing pains. Like, it wasn't like he started as a true freshman and was an absolute star. So I don't know. USC is. I don't know. We need to get into that, but like, I guess USC as a name, was surprising. But like, when you think about the state of USC right now, I guess it's not as surprising.
I guess so.
But that's so Chasen's gone. Xavier Townsend, we've already talked about. He's been gone for a while. He is now back at Iowa State. Can we even say? I know he never made it there in the first place, but he was committed to Iowa State out of high school, then flipped to UCF, and he's now going to Iowa State.
You can go scroll way back in our pod feed. You can find our podcast from 2021 talking about how UCF flipping Townsend from Iowa State at the last minute was a sign of how UCF's brand has changed, because that used to be the whole thing. You could never ever, like, there were so many higher rated players who just said, well, I'm a Power 5 player, so I can go to UCF. And Townsend was one of the first who turned down a sort of mid-tier. Is Iowa State mid-tier Power 4? I think that's a fair description. At the time,
as a brand, especially at the time, and I think even still maybe as a brand. But I mean, obviously, this year they were really good. Yeah,
because that was the big leap that UCF had to overcome, and that Gus, to his credit, even though nothing else worked, did overcome, was that it wasn't so much about we need to start getting 4 stars and 5 stars and all this stuff. It was just you need to stop the guys who are leaving to go to like middle tier Power 4 programs, like guys from the greater Orlando area who are going to NC State or Boston College or wherever. And that was, he was a big example of that. And 4 years later, he is right back where he was going to be originally after him. I don't really know how to quantify or care to quantify the Xavier Townsend era at UCF. It just felt like it was a lot of expectations without ever, transit. I don't know what to call it. I really don't want to do this thing where we just start down talking players who left UCF, but Townsend, it always felt like we were waiting for the leap to happen and it never happened. I still wish he was here because wow, was the offense then, but there are other losses I'm feeling significantly worse about than that one.
I feel worse about him transferring now that Frost is here than I did had Gus stayed. Because I don't know that he was ever going to take that next leap under Gus because it's just, I don't know. It just didn't seem like it was going to happen for him in that style of offense. But I don't know. He feels like a guy that Frost would have loved having. But now he's at Iowa State. Riley Trujillo also entered the portal, joining E.J. Colson. So now UCF is down to, 2 scholarship quarterbacks?
2 scholarship quarterbacks who both have starting experience at UCF, thanks to us making sure everyone got a game in this year.
Yeah, thanks to this year.
Dylan Risk and Jakari Brown, if you didn't know who they were.
Yeah, Marcellus Marshall's another one. Matt Alexander, defensive tackle. Wide receiver Tyree Patterson, who I believe today committed to Middle Tennessee.
Yep.
Caden Kittler's another one we've talked about, and then the other ones we already knew, Caven Call and Colton Boomer. But I kind of want to I guess before we even talk about a couple of the 2 guys that they've added through the portal, just what this roster looks like. I don't even know if you can say what it looks like, what it doesn't look like. There's holes everywhere. And are you going
to talk about the guys who hit the portal and have now returned to UCF?
Oh, yeah. Nigel Kelly, who you mentioned. Yeah, Nigel Kelly, who you mentioned. Antoine Jackson, who said, I forgot, what was the injury he said he was playing with since
I forget
2 years ago. So maybe if he, I don't know, because he did not play well this year, but he's back.
I'm going to say a really mean thing, and Bailey's looking at me like I shouldn't say it.
Well, I don't know what you're going to say.
And he can prove me wrong. When the notification hit that he was leaving the portal, I was upset. I'm not even joking. I genuinely was upset. I was just like, damn it. Because also I think things are fit enough. They'll probably have to play him. And listen, now he said he had an injury the whole time. Maybe we were not big believers in Antoine Jackson.
We were before the season. I did believe that's maybe, I don't know. Maybe the injury was holding him back. But again, I don't know why.
I don't know if an injury makes you get lost at coverage.
I don't know. I don't.
But we'll see.
Other 2 today that have decided to stay, Derek LeBlanc and Cam Moore. So, I mean, cool. I don't know. We've seen. We saw Cam Moore play a little bit as a true freshman and filled in when he needed to, and actually filled in pretty admirably back in 22. But I don't. Yeah, the Derek LeBlanc, we've never even really seen him play, and these don't move me that much. So
it's cool.
I don't know.
I wonder how much of that was, we're being mean on this podcast. I wonder how much of that was Frost swaying them, or they looked at the offers they were getting and were like, maybe I should 2 guys who don't have a lot of tape. But
I don't think that's mean. That's just the reality of the portal, I think.
Yeah. I mean, that's the one. Those are the ones that bother me. It doesn't bother me when a Randy Pittman hits the portal, right? Or a Lee Hunter, guys who are going to have serious monetary offers. It's guys who have not played and probably will have the opportunity to, given the current state of UCF, and are like, no, I need to leave because there was a coaching change. That I don't get. So they probably made the right decisions for themselves to come back, because I think Derek LeBlanc, we don't really know we never saw him at all this year, but honestly, I don't trust anything the previous staff did as far as evaluation of who should be on the field. As we saw last year, they repeatedly were learning in real time that they put the wrong guys out there to start the season. So we'll see. But those are two guys with the holes on defense. They might think they can get on the field next year. And I think it's worth sticking around. Listen, go through spring ball, see where you're at. If you feel like you're buried again, then you can leave in that window. But there is other significant news on the horizon if we're going based on just players tweeting.
Yeah.
And that would be the Henderson twins, both. I believe the started with Damari Henderson adding his brother with a snowflake emoji, and then his brother
with a question mark, right?
With a question mark, and then his brother saying, "Should we do it?" and with also a snowflake emoji. So either they're the best trolls of all time, which is possible, or the Henderson twins may be on the cusp of returning to UCF. And that is one. Cam Moore and Derek LeBlanc, cool. Henderson twins coming back, Frost getting them back gets me absolutely hyped, because those were losses that hurt. Damari is, when he's healthy, is one of the best players on UCF's defense. And Jakari was really starting to come into his own as this year went along. And what makes that extra interesting is that those were guys that we'd heard were probably headed out like very early this past season. Like, I don't think that was not like the coaching staff changed, so we're leaving. I think they were always planning to leave. So that was going to be a loss for the Malzahn staff. And the fact that it looks like, if we're basing it on that Frost may be on the cusp of bringing those guys back, that's the biggest win of Frost's second UCF tenure so far.
And so now I kind of skipped ahead before I meant to. Like, I'm glad you brought me back here, because those guys staying, and I will mention the two that they've gotten in the portal, which were Tulsa defensive tackle RJ Jackson and Maryland safety Brandon Jacob. And it has me wondering, because of the Henderson twins sticking around, the other, actually every player who has entered the portal and decided to stick are all on defense. There's no defensive staff in place right now
that we know of.
Yeah, that we know of.
There have been rumblings. There may be some people there who have not been announced.
Okay. I mean, then it sounds like you know more than I do, but
no, I've told you all of this, but it's fine.
I don't recall. I can't keep. Somebody asked me today, like, "Oh, what's the latest?" And I'm like, I don't know. Like, I can't keep anything straight in my head anymore, because I see 8 different names linked to, the GM position or whatever, and a million different, different assistants and different guys visiting and on recruiting from the portal. So I don't know. There's too many names right now.
So we don't know who the DC is going to be. I don't believe they've hired a DC. We do have an idea of who a couple of the positions coaches may be, who may already be in the building working. And that's probably how they're getting some of these guys. You can read between the lines on the positions of guys who are interested or getting offers and committing. But that was kind of, like we said, Becton's now been announced as wide receivers coach. It was like the worst kept secret after all of the offensive offers were to wide receivers. Like, gee, I wonder I wonder what position coach they hired for.
Yeah. So with all of that said, RJ Jackson was a guy, 3 sacks at Tulsa last year. Believe he was Tulsa's leading sacker, and 3 sacks doesn't sound like a lot, but I think what I tell you on Saturday, it would have been the 4th highest total on UCF's roster last season.
Yeah, which hurt me dearly when you put it in those terms. But
yeah,
I don't know if he's going to be any good. Boy, have I learned my lesson from our last few years of doing this podcast on declaring anyone's a get. But I mean, I just want to see them bringing in bodies at positions of need. And I always want to see them bringing guys who've been playing. I'm still a big believer in that's more valuable to me than guys who rode the bench for 2 years and are looking somewhere else. So yeah, I'm totally cool on bringing RJ Jackson in. And also it's like, it's at DT. It's like, he doesn't need to come in and be a star. Like they have John Walker. They do need to find another starter there, but it's like, if he can just contribute and be in the rotation, that's a win.
Yeah. 6'3", 282 out of Oklahoma. And he is, I believe, going to be a junior. So
we love multi-year eligibility too. That's the other big win from the portal.
Yeah, and then the other one was the Maryland safety, Brandon Jacob. If his name sounds familiar to you at all, you must follow UCF recruiting pretty closely, because UCF, I think, came pretty close to landing him out of high school last year. Then he ended up going to Maryland, and now he's back home as a hometown hero, which he included in his tweet. We talked about that on the podcast, didn't we? That is a, like, not just a trend, but a term that is sticking with this.
Which is cool. I was fully expecting it to die. It felt like it died for me when Nakai hit the portal, but It's honestly, it's been more powerful than ever now, actually, in my opinion, because you're having guys commit without coaches at one point.
Yeah.
And the thing about Brandon Jacob is I don't know if they have someone in there right now who's going to be coaching the secondary. So the fact that he's committing, and it's funny because he's a guy who, and that's why, like I said, I know I'm sound like a broken record, but we really are going to learn what if the recruiting bump was Gus and what if the recruiting bump was the move to the Big 12, because that's another guy where Brandon Hellig was reposting quotes from when he interviewed him a year ago when he was coming out of high school, and he was talking about how he was intrigued by UCF, the idea of his family getting to come to his game and getting to stay home and play for his hometown. And that's something that's going to and already has transcended staff, is we're seeing highly rated guys out of high school who, maybe they pick UCF right away. Maybe they go somewhere else and a year goes by. And this isn't a guy who, to be clear, just got to Maryland and, he can't compete and he's gone. He was playing on special teams. He was getting in there a little bit. That's not bad to see for a true freshman. That implies there's going to be a bigger role for him down the line. And I don't know if that means it's going to work out here, but it's still nice to see. And it's a guy who just wanted to be closer to home. And that's an advantage that it's why for all the NIL challenges and the portal challenges that are affecting everybody, UCF is still better positioned just as a default from a lot of schools because they're in such a hotbed. There's so much high level talent that comes out of here that there's always going to be guys who a big factor is they just want to go home, and UCF can offer them the ability to be home and still play at the highest level of the sport.
Yeah, and I think that's what I like about it is like you said, he did get to see the field a little bit for Maryland, and it's not I went to Maryland, didn't get to play at all, and now I want to come back and try to play at UCF. I mean, I don't know. I'm obviously thinking and reading between the lines of it, it feels like, he wants to be playing back closer to home, and it's an opportunity for him to do that. And hopefully, I mean, I think we talked a little bit. I can never remember what's on the podcast and what you and I talk about when we just hang out. But the secondary, it seems like they still are always going to have like a big group there. You don't really know where everybody's going to play, but like there are plenty of names. I think as far as these different position groups right now, I think there's probably the most. We know the most about the secondary, maybe not where everybody's going to play, but as far as what they have there, we might know the most about that position group.
I think so, because you've got who's coming back. You got like Braden Marshall, Antoine Jackson. You're adding in Brandon Jacob. Like there's going to be.
If the Henderson twins are back too. I mean,
Henderson twins pretty much help solve that. Yeah, that'd be huge too. So it's that the secondary is not a position group that I'm particularly worried about. It's not necessarily like there's no deep group on UCF's roster right now because that's what happens when almost 30 guys hit the portal. They'll have to build that depth back. But it's so funny, and I'm very curious and terrified for what the hell the offense is going to be next year, because you look at the defense and it's like we said, D-line. I see they largely have a D-line in place. Linebacker, they need more, but X-Ray Alexander somehow has not hit the portal, which I was convinced that would happen, and that's a huge deal if he sticks around. The secondary, you might be adding back the Henderson twins. You have Braden Marshall. Like you have pieces on the defense. The offense is a barren wasteland of nothing right now. Like there is how many offensive starters from last year are going to play this year? Is it one? Is it Paul Rubel?
Did you call him a star? Starter. Okay, I heard
Boy,
star.
did I not call Paul Rubel?
I heard star, and I was blown away.
If I said that, I did not mean to.
I think you said starter. I don't know. I think it must be right.
Should I pull up the list from this past?
Medley's gone.
All right, let me give you the offensive starters from last year. Quarterback, you know the deal. I'm not going to read them all. Running back was RJ Harvey. I guess Miles Montgomery, he wasn't a starter, but these guys still there. So tight end, I don't know. They played Randy Pittman and Evan Morris. Both those guys are gone. Wide receivers were Kobe Hudson, Xavier Townsend at the beginning of the year, Trent Whittemore, Jacoby Jones. Those are all guys who aren't here anymore. Kite is gone. Medley is gone. Kittler is gone. Marcellus Marshall is gone. Paul Rubel. That's your guy. That's the one you're gonna literally turn over the entire offense in an offseason.
Who I don't know if it's just because he's been here for such a long time or he's one of the few people remaining that people know. But didn't he? I think he just spoke at like the Roth Tower groundbreaking.
Yes,
and
he did.
He's been like an ambassador for UCF over the last couple of weeks.
Well, I believe next year is going to be his 6th year at UCF.
Yeah, no, he's been around forever.
It's a long time. It's longer than I was at UCF.
But yeah, he's the only him and I think as far as if you want to call them contributors, like he and Miles Montgomery, the only ones.
That's it.
And everything else we don't know.
Until Frost falls in love with Jakari Brown in spring ball.
Or Dylan Risk. Yeah, that's the thing. I guess it could be one of them. But
which of those guys strikes you more as a quarterback that Frost would get interested in?
Dylan.
I think it's Risk, which is funny because I'm not trying to be anti-Malzahn, but just from the quarterbacks that Frost was interested in his time here, it feels like Risk more fits the profile.
Yeah, but so I wrote down just like kind of some needs. And
Did you just write down a team?
Yeah, pretty much. I wrote down quarterback, arguably running back, wide receiver, offensive line, defensive tackle, linebacker, and punter.
Yes.
That's the thing. Like you said on the defense, like they could use definitely probably another starter at tackle and linebacker, and probably on the outside too. But more so depth at those positions.
Yeah.
On offense, with the quarterback, with probably running back. I don't know if Miles Montgomery is going to be your starter, so you're probably going to need a starting running back unless it's.
I'm going to tell you right now. Yeah. I really do think Miles could be the starter. I think he was really good this year with basically every rep he got. And I thought that was why he eventually overtook Penny Boone, who stopped existing for some reason. And Johnny Richardson is because he really was like an RJ clone in some ways and obviously wasn't as good, but they could just plug him in and there wasn't really a huge drop off. I totally think Miles could be your number one running back. I don't feel like they have to go get a guy. Yeah.
They're going to have to get someone though, I think.
They have to get someone to fill out the room. I don't think they need to be like, we need to find a starting running back is what I'm saying.
And then also I'm trying to think, and this is the first time I've thought of this, but compare how Gus liked to use mostly one running back and how Frost would do it in his time. So
Frost,
maybe they do need to go get
a whole bunch of backs getting out there. I had not thought about that.
They do need to go get a starting caliber guy, or maybe, I don't know. I don't know what this team's going to look like and what the aspirations for next year will be, because if you're just playing a bunch of young guys, sure, give Tavion Swint some carries, give Stacey Gage some carries. He's still here, right? Stacey Gage
is still here. Yeah, he's still here. We didn't really see him last year, but you never know.
Yeah.
Really quickly, just while we're talking about the offense, I know we were going to get this in the news, but the other big thing is UCF did hire an offensive coordinator since our last podcast. Yes. And it's interesting because we're talking about a Frost offense. And what's interesting is, so they hired Steve Cooper, who was an analyst at Boise State. No, I do not love UCF hiring an analyst to be their offensive coordinator. I think that's insane, but he was with Frost at Nebraska. He was also an offensive coordinator at the FCS level, where the team went 3-9 and they didn't score any points. But again, whatever, cool. 2-9, I think, actually. I'm so out on that hire. Like, and I don't know. I think that it's partially a play that, all of his experiences with quarterbacks, and there was no mention of him coaching a position group. So I wonder if part of his role will be kind of helping coach up Milton, who will obviously be a first-time positions coach. And I think that makes perfect sense. But the big thing that signaled when we're talking about offenses, that signaled that Frost is going to run this offense and have command of this offense. You don't bring in, that's probably why that OC job went to someone like that. And I will say two things on that. I will say the negative one first and the positive one. The negative one is that all of my concerns about Gus running the offense in modern college football hold true for Frost. That wasn't because I don't like Gus's offense thing. It was because no one does that anymore. All of the major programs at this point, their head coaches have given up play calling. Clearly, Frost intends to do that here with that hire. I mean, we'll see, but that certainly seems to be the way this is trending. I think that's probably a bad idea, but whatever. The positive thing is I loved Frost's offense, and cool. We'll get to see it again.
Right. That was what you said. Like, we talked about this the other day, and I was thinking, like, yeah, those concerns are still there, but I like Frost calling the offense more than I like Gus calling the offense, because I like Frost's offense more. And
Frost's offense was fun even when it was bad.
Yeah.
That was part of what I liked about it. I mean, I know that sounds bad.
Offense was bad. It was not fun.
It was really bad. Like, there were some games in 2016 where, like, they were just, it's so funny. That's what's funny about this too, is because the 2016 season, which was Frost's first season, was a defense that was pretty experienced and honestly pretty solid, and an offense that was nothing but young guys. And it's like, that's kind of where this is trending for 2025, because they don't have an offense right now and they have a pretty solid defensive place. But there were games where it was like, oh my God, it was all these young guys and just mistakes would happen. There were games where it would all fall apart. And it was still rarely boring. Like, there'd still always be like one or two like crazy highlight plays. And I don't know, I just, it's a fun offense to watch. It's very engaging. And I'm looking forward to seeing, I don't think it's going to look exactly the same. It's been years. College football has changed, but I think it's going to be fun to see a version of that again, and just see players used in exciting and interesting ways, and not just, we need a mobile quarterback and we need to hand off to our running back 90 times. And that's the game, Yeah. If they run a reverse at any point in that first game, I'm going to lose my mind, but whatever.
There will be conspiracy. All the conspiracies were like when Hinshaw was calling the offense, they're like, oh no, Gus is still calling plays. They're going to call a reverse in the first game, and they're going to be like, Gus is he's still around.
All I'm going to say about Frost is
he left his playbook in the press box in the booth.
Frost picked it up and was like, this is genius. Only 2 plays. That's awesome. All I'm going to say is that at no point in Frost's tenure at UCF or even at Nebraska did he give a press conference where he discussed discovering the idea of vertical passing. So
he did it again. Gus did that again at Florida State.
That wasn't even where I was going with this, but you're right. Gus in his opening presser at Florida State talked about the importance of vertical passing, how they have to implement that. It's like Hinshaw gave him a buzzword in his interview, and Gus was just like, I'd never considered that like we should be trying to throw the ball downfield. It's crazy.
It's insane. But so that's, as I was getting along on the needs, like they don't have any wide receivers that we really know anything about.
They have none.
Paul Rubelt is the only offensive lineman we know anything about, I think, at this point. So they need to basically build an entire offensive line. This is scary. And
it's funny because I tweeted earlier today because they're going after DJ Black, who's from Limestone, which is a D2 school. He was a wide receiver who put up really good numbers there, and there's a lot of schools going after him. And I said that I don't think there's a position group UCF is more helpless at right now than wide receiver. And then I thought about it more, and I'm like, no, wait, I think it's O-line because is there anything that can just immediately tank this season having any expectations faster than if they just don't have an O-line?
No, and the problem about this is the one person returning is Paul Rubelt, and I think he was the worst of the 5 last year.
No, SJ Tui was very clear on that Twitter space with JP Gilbert that Paul Rubelt
is the lineman. I thought NFL scouts were coming to practice to look at him. Wait, why did he come back? That was one of the more insane things of last season. There were a lot of things in the whole season.
I need to dive into the PFF numbers more before I claim for sure that Paul Rubelt was the worst O-lineman this year, but it did feel like every time there was some big screw up, it was typically him. I don't think he was horrible. It wasn't like, my God, get him off the field. It just kind of felt like he was the weak link a lot of the season.
Yeah. And if, as this podcast goes on, I can probably look that up very quickly, but I'm not going to be able to do that and talk at the same time.
I mean, here, you look it up and I'll talk because I have more to say on the O-line. And there's nothing I love more than the sound of my own voice, so I can go for a while here. And the thing about the O-line that freaks me out, honestly, is we've talked about in this podcast before, if you're not like super into college football as a whole, or you don't know how things tend to work in the portal, it's generally agreed upon that there is not a position that is harder to build through the portal than the O-line. And it's for a few reasons. It's that they're sought after, so schools spend a lot of money on them. So even guys who aren't that amazing hit the portal and immediately have big money offers. I think it's clear that UCF is not doing a lot of big money offers this year. And it's also just O-linemen tend to not move around a lot. It's one of the lowest portaling rates. Those guys tend to stay at the school they're at. So it's just always a small pool that everyone ends up fighting over. And we've seen UCF try to build O-line through the portal, and they had some big wins under her hand. They got Marcellus Marshall. They got Amari Kite, but they had some big losses too. Guys like Wes Dorsey or like Jabari Brooks, who they brought in. And you assume they're going to plug in and they just don't play. And so what's scary for UCF is it's not even like, well, you hope to supplement through the portal. They got to build this O-line through the portal. I mean, there is like one guy on the roster right now outside of Rubelt who I'm hopeful can play next year, and it's Walt Claire Flynn, who we don't really know that. We're just hopeful because he was highly rated. We never saw him at all, so it's dire. And it's like we talked about, if they can't get an O-line together, which feels likely, that's the ball game for 2025 right there. They're not crawling out of that if they have a bad O-line, if they have multiple weak spots on that O-line in a Power 4 conference.
Yeah. And let me look at this. So offensive grades. Omari Kite was the best rated offensive lineman. Caden Kittler was second. Paul Rubelt was third.
Really? Adam Marcellus.
As far as overall grades.
We've talked about this. Marcellus graded badly a lot, which always surprised me.
Very badly.
Yeah.
He was down at a 57 overall. Medley was right behind Paul Rubelt. And Paul Rubelt was a 67.5 overall. Run blocking, I think it was pretty much the same. Like Amari Kite led the way. Medley was a little bit better on that than Rubelt, but Rubelt was ahead of Kittler. So I don't know. Maybe it's more so for Paul was the penalties. I feel like he was probably the most penalized player, which I can actually look that up too. He and Amari both 5 penalties each.
Yeah.
So, and it felt like way more than 5. Maybe
I was going to say, I'm surprised it's only 5. But I do remember, because I'm just a biased person. If you listen to the podcast, you know that I was not okay with starting Rubelt. I thought that it was a really bad idea because I'm not a big believer in guys sits on the roster for 4 years and then is suddenly good. So I just assumed it was a bad idea. And I remember there was some game this year where Rubelt gets a penalty. It was holding or something. And I'm just so frustrated. Like, I'm like, there we go. Like, just costing them the drive. Great. And then, like, I don't remember if it was that same drive or a few plays later or whatever, Amari Kite gets called for holding. And I'm like, it happens. I just immediately apply double standards to the players depending on what I wanted to happen. But
so I'm looking at the roster. Here's where it's bad for Paul Rubelt was he and Adrian Medley tied for the most sacks allowed last year with 5.
See, that's bad. That's what you don't want to see. Cool. I'm looking at their roster right now, like for other alignment, there is literally no one. Like, these are guys who you cannot put on a football.
So, correct me if I'm wrong, Walt Claire Flynn came in as a center, right? And now Caden Kittler's gone, so maybe he'll get first crack. I don't know if he'll get first crack.
Yeah, but Brandon Helwig tweeted earlier today that UCF's targeting a center in the portal right now.
Okay, well, then he'll play guard. I don't know. I think for how highly rated he was, he'll get a shot to play somewhere, especially with there being nobody else to play. Yeah. and maybe he'll be good. I don't know. I have high hopes for him. I was really big on him just as a recruit. So we'll see.
And it wasn't a surprise that he did not play last year. The plan always for him. There was no expectation that he was going to come.
And where would he? Like, where would he have?
Yeah, like he was not going to beat out Killer. So I'm as long as he sticks, who knows? Watch him follow Herb Hand at FSU at some point this week. Then you can probably very tentatively slot him in as another starter.
Yeah, but this is an offense that is going to be completely built through, I guess, the portal and maybe a little bit of high school recruiting in the spring, but
there's not a lot left out there. Yeah. I mean, they'll probably snag another guy or two, but it's not a lot out there. Yeah.
And you mentioned DJ Black was his name, right? The receiver.
Yep.
There's been a couple other guys who they're supposedly bringing in on visits. I know one of them was a quarterback, Chandler Morris.
Yep.
Where was he from? Because I know he started at SMU, didn't he?
Yeah. Or TCU, wasn't it?
Or was it TCU? TCU. Maybe.
Yeah, pretty sure it was TCU. And then he went to North Texas, and he had a really, really good year for North Texas. Actually, he, I believe it was. I'm trying to pull up the stats really quickly, but I think he had.
You got him if you need.
Like 3,700 yards, 31 touchdowns to 12 interceptions, or something like that. How am I doing? Am I right? Yep.
Yeah, 37, almost 3,800 yards, 31 touchdowns, 12 picks. I believe he had decent rushing stats too. He ran for 242 yards and 4 more touchdowns, so 35 total touchdowns. I don't have any recollection of him starting his career at Oklahoma.
Neither do I.
From Oklahoma, then 3 seasons at TCU, then this past season at North Texas.
The reason I remembered him at TCU is because I believe he was very famously the guy who beat out Max Duggan for the starting job the year that Max Duggan then was a Heisman finalist. But now you kind of talked me out of my annoyance with this one. Well, annoyance isn't the right word, but my issue of Chandler Morris is that. Say that again.
The trepidation, maybe.
My trepidation. There you go. It's perfect. You should just do the words for me. I don't even need to talk. My trepidation with it was that he is out of eligibility after this year. This is another rental quarterback. And I'm not saying that I'm like, rental quarterbacks are bad, because KJ didn't work. It was just more that I've long felt that, because guys, if you haven't figured it out from the tone of this podcast, 2025, not going to be a good season. UCF is not going to win a lot of games. And I've long felt that was more palatable if it's a young team that's learning. If it's another 2016 style vibe where, UCF might only go 4-8 again. But if they did it with all these young guys who are starting to show flashes in the first year of a coaching staff, it's like, well, okay, they're building this, makes for an exciting 2026. The fan base stays engaged. And I felt like a lot of that goes out the window if you're doing it with a quarterback who's not going to be here a year from now. Mm-hmm. But you pointed out that he raises the floor of how bad the offense can be just because of how good he appears to be. And he's someone who the rest of the team can learn from. He can open things up to help those young guys on offense have more success early because they're working with a good quarterback. So I don't know. I wouldn't hate that. I'm not going to throw a fit if UCF lands a quarterback with that stat line this past year.
No, I don't know if it's going to happen just because of what UCF's outlook is next year. I don't know what other kind of offers he's getting, but I've found myself growing more and more like I want them to land him. And I look at it because like what you just said, which is what I said. But there's also the element of if it's not him, and maybe, I don't know, it could be a different portal quarterback, but it all kind of depends on if Frost falls in love with Shakari Brown or Dylan Risk.
Right.
And if he's not big on either of them, then they probably should go get a portal quarterback, even if it's one with 1 year of eligibility, so that they can bridge the gap to give Frost more time to find that quarterback that he is in love with.
Right.
You know, finding somebody, whether it's a recruit or if it's, I don't know, you never know who's going to become available in the portal next year, or maybe even after spring ball, which I don't know. That probably isn't ideal to bring in a quarterback to start after spring.
It's not ideal, but also you might not have the worst options because there typically is a bit of a quarterback surge following spring because guys figure out that they're not going to win the job at their place. And that doesn't always mean they're a bad quarterback. It just means they're not winning the job there and they might hit the portal. So it's not the worst. It wouldn't surprise me a ton if they wait till spring to see what's shaking at quarterback, but I don't know. It's so funny to try to learn Frost. It's like he was here for 2 years. So we just don't know. I mean, we always talked about how Gus was so quarterback. It was like he's starting his guy and that's what's going to happen. And Frost kind of did the same thing at UCF. I mean, he inherited Holman and benched him for Milton pretty quickly, even though Holman, they probably would have had maybe a slightly better record, but Milton had shown enough to say, okay, he has potential. And then at Nebraska, what was the whole thing is everyone wanted him to move on from Adrian Martinez and he just wouldn't. So he's kind of shown similar tendencies to Gus in that way. So I don't know if I'm buying him coming in and falling in love with Risker Jakari just because those aren't his guys. I'm wondering if it will be either a guy he gets in the portal, a guy they get through high school. You know, what about Malachi Singleton? He's in the portal.
Sure. I don't know. Haven't seen him play. I think he played a little bit this year at Arkansas, right?
Yeah, he's not. I haven't seen him tied to UCF in any way since he hit the portal. But just another name to who knows.
I think
that'd be another funny one.
Is Chandler Morris the only one we've seen tied to UCF so far? I
swear there was another one, but I can't remember who it was.
This is where it's a bad thing that you and I text as often as we do, because I could scroll back up, but I'd probably have to scroll back.
There's no way we would find it. Yeah, I think there was another one, but I don't think it was some name where I was like, whoa. I think it was just okay.
No, Chandler Morris was the one where I saw it. I looked up his stats and I was like, oh, yeah, give me that guy.
Yeah.
But I don't know. We'll see. Do you want to move on?
No, I don't want a good quarterback. Give me a young guy who sucks so I can be more excited for 2026.
Yeah. We spent more time on this roster stuff than I expected to.
40 minutes on the first half of our podcast. So I guess we'll rapid fire our next topic.
Yeah, let's move on, which I guess it's probably a good thing to not dwell on all of this so much. It's more kind of throwing these ideas out there rather than making declarations on things. Although I don't know.
Make some declarations. Let's do it.
You like to do that.
Yeah.
So looking at why this Scott Frost hiring will or will not work, how do you want to do this? I always do this. I'm like, we get on the podcast. I'm like, how do you want to? Do you want to do all the wills first, or do you want to go will, won't?
I like alternating them, I think.
All right, let's
alternate them. Yeah, let's do that.
All right. First reason to talk about why it will work is that they'll have more resources to work with than anyone else would have had, at least in terms of donor support and just kind of what they've generated already. I know you had sent this to me about what they've reported on as far as these gifts and donations since his hiring, right?
Yeah, Matt Rochelle at the Orlando Sentinel reported a few days ago that just in the short amount of time, and when was Frost hired? Like a week and a half ago at this point?
2 Saturdays ago.
Yeah, at the time this article was published, I think it had been like not even a week and a half, and UCF told the Sentinel they've already had 9 major gifts in that span. I believe, I don't know for sure. I think UCF typically, when they say major gifts, that's usually $25,000 and up. So they're fundraising quickly. I think that it's just, we've talked about this on past podcasts, but it's for whatever reason, not for whatever reasons, because he went undefeated here, but Scott Frost is, he's like a legend. I mean, he literally is like a UCF legend. He's more beloved here than even O'Leary, who spent years here and built the program up, whatever. It's just kind of funny. He was here for exactly 2 years and that happened. But the benefits of that is him coming back in. It was like, oh my God, it was just immediate energy for the fan base, for the shareholders, for the boosters, for everyone. And that's resulted in him having, I think, we don't know the numbers, but I think it's safe to say that UCF would not have reported 9 major gifts if they'd hired Barry Odom. I think that fans are ready to give money. Can I say something really stupid about myself? Yeah. UCF emailed me hitting me up for money the day after they hired him. I'll probably, if you're listening to a lot, you got that email, and I immediately gave them money. I was like, sure. I didn't give a lot because, I'm not a booster, but I was like, sure, have some money. And I think I think that Frost is going to have a bigger budget to play with than really anyone else they could have hired. Other than, I don't know. I think fans were excited for Summerall. I think they could have sold that one, but when we got late in the search here and some of the names that were left, it was like, if they had hired Barry Odom, I think the fan base would have revolted. I think they would have been really pissed off.
Yeah.
And that's probably part of why they didn't do that. So
that's funny. It's funny you say that just going back to you saying that you think that at the time of this article coming out or the report that it was like a week and a half since his hiring. It's not even a week and a half right now since his hiring. He was hired 8 days ago.
Okay, that's what I thought. I thought it was last week, but this stuff is
like not even 2 Saturday. It was a week ago this past Saturday. So yeah,
college football is so broken, and it's not for the reason that like the college football haters think it's broken. It's not NIL. It's that they try to do 90 billion things at the same time. Like I think it was on I forget what podcast. I think it was Dan Wetzel on College Football Inquirer used to say that college football is the only sport where they do the postseason, the draft, and free agency all at the exact same time. And that is literally exactly what happens. Like they do high school recruiting, they do coaching hires, they do portal recruiting, and they do the playoff all in the same month. And that makes no damn sense. So it's like time just becomes so.
Well, Christian, they must have a lot. They must have a lot that they do over the other 8 months of the offseason.
And then they do nothing. And then they just have the longest offseason in sports where they do nothing for months at a time. But we have to get all this crap done. I mean, why can't it? I mean, I do think that this is funny. I don't want to get too into the like nitty gritty of college football, but like another thing is that coaches are really done with the early signing period in college football about everyone signing in December. And apparently the NCAA's solution, which might get implemented next year, is just get rid of the February one and just only have the December one, which helps nothing. Like get it out of December. I mean, and also it's got to go back to February in my opinion.
And it's becoming even like with all that, it's becoming a huge topic of conversation. Just like last night, Penn State's backup quarterback entered the portal and he's not sticking with the team. They're in the playoff. And so it's becoming a big the conversation point that like this puts some of these kids in like impossible situations where it's like they don't know, like they have to make a decision like that where it's like I'm going to leave my team that's in the playoff to go find where I'm going to play next year.
Because you have to. You're missing out on opportunities if you don't. And you have Marshall wins the Sun Belt and then accepts the bowl invitation that they then later leave because their coach left and all their players at the portal and they can't field a team. It's so dumb because these are so fixable. They literally just have to change the timing on this stuff. Like when Frost was hired in 2016, he was hired in December, if I remember right. And so he had 2 months to string a high school class together. 2 months is a long time in college football. And he added a bunch of guys in those 2 months who went on to be literal legends of UCF, guys who ended up literally being some of the best players to come through here, became NFL draft picks. Frost gets hired this time around and they're like, well, you missed it. Like, sorry, we already did it, which again, I'm happy they hired Frost. I'm just going to say it for probably the 50th time. There is absolutely no reason that they had to wait till after signing day to hire him. He was available. They could have hired him 2 hours after Gus left and they said, let's wait through signing day to do it. So whatever, but yeah, those rules got to change. But yeah, that is definitely, just to get us back on topic, that's a pro for Frost. You have a lot of money and a lot more resources to play with than probably anyone else they could have hired.
Yeah. For the first reason why it won't work, it's pretty simple. No one else would have hired him at this stage. Yeah. He would not have. And I think part of what he said probably rings true is that he wasn't looking to come back to college for just any job. And this one became open and he jumped at it. But I don't think he was getting a ton of offers out there anyway, especially to be a head coach after a year off and then a few months with the Rams.
And that's been a lot of the national college football media reaction has been like good for UCF or good for Frost, but like no one was going to hire this guy. I mean, I really, it's the two harsh realities here are one, it's not a stretch or exaggeration to say that of the 68 Power 4 jobs, none of them would have offered him their job if they'd all been open. There's not a single one except for UCF that would have offered him that job. There's also a case to be made, and I know no one wants to hear this, that he is not qualified for this job. UCF is not the job it was in 2016. College football is not what it was in 2016. He hasn't actually shown anywhere that he can do this. We're just kind of hoping. And that doesn't mean he can't, because coaches all the time are unproven. Lance Leipold, who Danny White unearthed from D3, came up and is now one of the best coaches in college football. Like, it happens, but it is a risk. This is not a resume that, I mean, UCF, it's a full-on pure nostalgia hire of we are hiring him literally just because the fan base likes him. That's it.
Yeah, and that's where it gets scary, because it's like his track record overall, like what he did at UCF was a whirlwind of 2 years where they were 0-12. They had talented players, but they were 0-12. He then kind of restored their love of the game, it felt like, which is what a lot of them were saying, and rallied them to 6-7 the next year, and then 13-0, and then he was gone. And then things did not go well at Nebraska. He was losing one-score games every week. Yes. And again, there are multiple reasons for that. Some of them aren't his fault. Some of them are. But it is kind of crazy when you look at what his resume is and look at what this job is and has become and the position that UCF is in. If 2017 hadn't happened the way it happened, this is a hard sell to the fan base. But obviously it did happen that way. Yeah. And everybody at this point, I would say most 95% of the fan base is in on this. And I mean, I'm in on it. I'm not saying any of this to say like, oh, they shouldn't have hired him.
No,
but
I think we've been pretty open about how we've been converted. Like, I'm in on it. Yeah. I was not like, I would have been more in on John Summerall, who decided not to take a job this cycle. But once it was down to who was available, I was in on this. Here's the thought, because let's just keep expanding this podcast that we're at 49 minutes on of our hour-long podcast, is let's go back in time and let's not even change everything that happened. Say that Mike Hughes doesn't return that kick, and say that UCF loses to USF. And then UCF doesn't go to the AAC title game because USF goes instead, and Frost just leaves that next week, and UCF goes to some random bowl. Does the fan base feel close to the same way about him that they do right now? Isn't that crazy? Like, we're gambling all of this on, like, literally you change a play from the 2017 season, and Frost is just not like, it's still like, oh yeah, he did well here. They went 11-1, or 10-1. It would have been. It's a totally different world. I mean, it really is like, I don't know.
Shout out Mike Hughes.
Shout out Mike Hughes.
Got Scout Frost the job in 2024.
But is this a good time for me to bring up that quote from that YouTube video that is not around anymore?
Yeah, do it. Okay. Wait, are we going back to the why it will work?
I guess so. but I don't know.
Are you going off script here? I don't know
where we're going. Do it. This kind of fits because it's about him not being qualified and all that. This is kind of in that
okay.
Mode. So and I have to give a little.
We can tie it into one of the reasons why it will work.
Yes, I have to give a little bit of backstory on this one because I recognize a lot of people listen to this podcast, and I feel a little uncomfortable putting a thing out there that's like a just trust me, bro. But there was a video on YouTube that Bailey and I both watched years ago before we had a podcast, which is why we did not talk about it. And it was some random YouTube account that I found because I'm a freak that was just posting like all 22 film of full UCF games, which I don't think like you're supposed to have. So I don't know if this is someone who had been on staff at some point or whatever. So because I'm a freak, this was the off season of 2020, was just like going through and watching them and just like having fun with that. And I then texted you because this account posted something else. It posted a 1 hour long video of Scott Frost giving a coaching clinic to, I believe it was high school coaches. And that video was from the off season before 2017. It was between the 2016 and 2017 seasons. And in the video, he in depth breaks down UCF's offense with lots of clips from UCF in 2016, from Oregon when he was there, explains everything they do and why they do it. Mm-hmm. This is so not a video that should have been on YouTube. And it was not something we talked about when we found it. And I think it had like 12 views or something. And it was funny because even through the course of the video, Frost says like 15 times, he's like, yeah, I don't usually share this type of stuff, or I probably shouldn't be saying, and someone's just recording this, and you have the whole thing. And again, I only have this quote because in 2020, when I watched this, I texted you the quote. So I hope it's accurate. But in this video that's now gone, I spent all day trying to find this.
If you had said that the whole "just trust me, bro" thing is because this video is now gone.
The whole account is gone.
Yeah.
And if you want to go look for this and find it, please do. But I searched nonstop today trying to find this. And I even had like screenshots of the names of the videos. All 22 film is gone. Like I think this all just got deleted. But at one point during this, if I transcribe this correctly, when I texted it to Bailey's quote in 2020, Frost said something along the lines of, when talking about his offense, if I was at Nebraska where we can't get the speed that we can get at Oregon or UCF, it ain't going to be a great offense to run. And part of the reason we had a lot of talks about this, and again, we probably would have talked about this on the podcast at the time if we'd had one, is that is a wild thing that was just sitting on YouTube, was Scott Frost admitting that his offense wouldn't work at Nebraska a year before he left to take the Nebraska job.
Yeah.
And it makes you a little hopeful for this time around because it worked at UCF. Frost felt very good about it at UCF, and it did wonders here. And maybe Nebraska was simply just, it was never a fit for the type of offense he runs, for the type of coach he is, from a culture perspective, from a strategy perspective, from a conference. The Big Ten's a very different conference, and maybe it can work again. I don't know.
Right. Yeah, no, and that's does tie in pretty perfectly with what we were just talking about as far as the qualifications, but also another reason why it will work is that style and that fit. And I remember, I don't remember if we would have this conversation at the time. We probably did. And I just remember it being a pretty common thought to have back in 2017 with UCF scoring 45, 51, 52 points, of being like, wow, like this is like a Big 12 offense.
Yeah.
And here we are. And, we'll see. And I think there will be tweaks to it. I don't think it's going to be the exact same as it was all those years ago, but.
And to be fair, the Big 12 has changed too. The Big 12 is a lot more defensive focused than it was maybe 10 years ago, but still it was a high flying fun offense where a lot of cool stuff happened all the time. Even when they were bad in 2016, like they'd lose games and I was still like, that was fun. So,
right.
Which I'm sorry, I'm just going to keep extending the podcast. Danny White, I don't know if this was ever like publicly stated, but it was like known in just like media circles around the team that he very much partially hired Frost and Heupel because he thought it was really important that the team was fun. Like he thought that you couldn't just win anyway. He really bought into the team needs to be fun, even when they're not good, for people to buy in. And, you saw that a little bit with Gus because it was just so not fun. And I think that it's an easier pitch to go watch a team that like UCF at some point this season is probably gonna be like 2-7 or something. If at least like you've got some fun players and you score some points, you can still get some fans out. If it's just this trudging, awful, not interesting football where nothing works and they play slow and it's boring, fans don't want to go see that.
Yeah, and I'm thinking like it's so weird to say this because you and I talked about this the other day. Like it's weird to say, Scott Frost, national champion winning quarterback at Nebraska. I think as a coach is a better fit culturally, style-wise, and just everything about him at UCF than he is at Nebraska. Like I think it's just, and he's obviously older than he was when he got to UCF, but he's still, kind of got that young vibe. You saw with just even the shoes that he was wearing at his press conference, like players gravitate toward that. And it's just the style fits so much more with UCF's brand than it did at traditional Nebraska.
Yeah. And I don't think it's necessarily an age thing because Frost isn't young anymore. He's 49 years old, but which I guess it's not crazy old or anything.
No.
I mean, it's 7 years younger than Gus, 8 years younger than Gus. It was never just an age thing of, oh, Gus is old, so he doesn't work for this brand. It was under Gus, UCF really did transition from being like the hip is the worst word I could have used to describe UCF as being cutting edge, but just, that kind of being that.
That's a word that Gus would use.
I know. That's right. Gus is like, we got a hip program, but just being sort of on the cutting edge of, we are the future of college football, which is the tagline they wanted to use with Gus, and just, really having that chip on your shoulder. We're a young up and coming program. And I think this is a Mahajer thing as much as it was a Gus thing. So I don't think it's just going to totally flip, but UCF transitioned into trying to operate like an establishment program. Gus really tried to run it like an SEC program without SEC resources, without SEC history. And Frost, and I want to give full credit to Gus. Gus was always down to embrace the fun side of it. He was always down to put on an astronaut suit or do a TikTok or whatever. He was down for
the QR codes and stuff right under him.
Yeah, it's not like that went away, but it's just clear that none of that was at Gus's. Gus wasn't the one calling for that stuff. It was the very good team around Gus that would loop him in on that stuff. And I think Frost was always just a little more open to pushing for that type of stuff when he was the one who was like, we got to get sleek uniforms. We got to come up with all these catchphrases like UC Fast, UC Fierce. We got to engage the fan base. I mean, that was, he held the torch on it. He carried the torch on that stuff. And I think Gus believed that he could build UCF into an SEC style program. I think Frost, in his quotes when he was here the first time, and even just what he said in these last 8 days, I think Frost is a little more in line with what UCF is, and a little more about that they're young and they're innovative and they're building. Frost had this quote. He was on he went on some Sirius XM radio show, and he said that the thing about UCF is you look at it every 4 years, and it's like a totally different program than it was the 4 years prior, and that is UCF in a nutshell. Is that statement? And I just really think he gets that.
Yeah, no, I think I'm still laughing at you saying the hip was the worst. UCF football, the future of college football is groovy.
It's hip. It's new. It's rad.
Groovy, it's far out. But I do just think that he the UCF taking on Gus's personality didn't really fit them. And I think kind of getting back to this feel is probably one of the more reasons that this, no one else would hire him, but maybe it's because no one else is the fit like this. And there's maybe something to that. So we'll move on to another thing that maybe why it won't work is just the idea or the thought or the question that maybe was 2017 lightning in a bottle. Was that because that if you look back at his track record, that was Scott Frost's one good year. I know I don't know. I don't like the way that I phrase that because I would say 2016, given the context, was a good coaching job and it was a very good year. So
they went from 0-12 to
look at it. Yeah, if you want to look at it from the context of those 2 years out of his wider coaching career, which includes Nebraska, was that run right there lightning in a bottle, or is that more of who he is as a coach than his Nebraska tenure was? And I think that does still some of that does go back to the fit, I think.
Yeah, it still his only winning season as a head coach, which is the scary part. But I think that listen, it was lightning in a bottle. Let's call it what it is. And I think fans understand that it's not like Frost is coming back to just do that again, that they're going to once again be undefeated and go crazy and all that. But I think the question you have to ask yourself is was that the trajectory of UCF? If Frost had stayed, is that what they are forever? Or was that a really special group of players? And I think the answer is somewhere in the middle because I think we really baited ourselves into believing that was the way things were going to be. And it wasn't so much 2017 that did it. It was 2018. Them just coming back and do it again just made you think this is how things are supposed to be now. And I think if Frost had stayed, I think they're in a better place than they are now. I think that they probably stay higher than they fell. But I don't think that they were ever just going to be that team that was just going to, win the conference every year, go to New Year's Six Bowl every year. So I think the answer is probably somewhere in the middle, but you do just wonder, you do worry, is it really just he struck gold with Milton and things worked out and he just had the most insane fluky run in recruiting classes ever, or is this something he can maintain or could have maintained?
So that's the things where I think like the term lightning in a bottle kind of feels negative in this context, but I think it's almost accurate in that how crazy is it that they were able to at one time or within this short span of time reconstruct or rebuild the entire culture of that team, get the most out of the good players that were already there, and some of them were playing pretty well or playing okay, but then got to play better under Frost, or like a Shaquem Griffin where he gives Shaquem a chance and Shaquem becomes the best player on the defense. And then all of that lining up with finding Mackenzie Milton and having him take that leap the way he did and take advantage of all the talent around him, and a transcendent generational type of quarterback for this program, who we haven't seen another one like him. So in that sense, all of that happening at once, that's what lightning in a bottle is. And that doesn't mean, because like you said, and then we can move into another reason why it will is his recruiting track record. Like you said,
yes.
Was it a fluke that he had that run of these recruiting classes? I don't feel like that can be something that you just luck into that many wins.
If it was one class, I'd be like, dang, they hit it. They came back and did it again in the second class. And that's why, this isn't the full class, but just the highlights. In 2 cycles at UCF, Frost and his staff brought in Jordan Johnson, Dredrick Snelson, Mackenzie Milton, Nate Evans, Marlon Williams, Adrian Killens, Tristan Hill, Bam Moore, Richie Grant, Marlon Williams, Otis Anderson, Gabe Davis, Sam Jackson, Cole Schneider, and Kalia Davis. All of those guys are like some of the best guys to ever come through UCF. And they got them all in 2 classes. And I think, and what's extra amazing about that is UCF was not like this recruiting. Most of those guys were under recruited. Those were not guys who everyone was going after. Those were guys that did not have a lot of offers, and that they gems. Yeah. The guys that they unearthed. And man, now you wonder, that's why it's like, if you're one of the people like me who's a little worried about Frost just sort of reassembling getting the band back together from Nebraska so far, a lot of those guys were involved in that evaluation the first time around. So maybe you pitch yourself on that, but if they can do anything, if they can be half as successful this time around, it's a win. It's crazy that that's what they brought in through 2 classes.
Yeah, and I'm very curious about all of that being guys that they unearthed that were gyms, under recruited, doing that. And I think that this staff can do that. Like, I don't know if you can do that. You can't replicate that. I don't know. Like, I don't know if it can be to that extent, but doing that kind of stuff, but also having access to some of these higher rated players and more talented players because of the position UCF is in now. Those 2 things married together is, again, like a big selling point for why it could work. And I'm very curious to see what it looks like. And you might know better than I do. Actually, sure, you know better than I do. His recruiting classes at Nebraska, they weren't bad, were they?
No, they were actually really good.
So that's the thing, is his track record at UCF was that good. And then, the results on the field didn't work out for him at Nebraska, but it's not like he was recruiting poorly then. So I think he's a good recruiter, and I think he kind of knows I think he knows how to do this.
Can I add a few names I kind of forgot the first time who weren't bad either? Daryl Mack, Bentavious Thompson, Antoine Collier. Mason Chalua. I didn't even I kind of thinned the list down, and there's still a lot of guys on here who were there
were some legitimate stars and names that UCF fans still know, and there were other guys who played key roles in those
Mike
teams.
Hughes, he didn't show up in the recruiting class as well, but that's a lot of really good guys they brought in. But that's the thing. At Nebraska, they did recruit well. They recruited. They were usually around 4th or 5th in the Big Ten every year, which is pretty good for Nebraska. Now, how much of that do you go back to? I would need to dive more into, was it them trying to play with speed where it's cold, or was it them not being able to get those speedy guys and more transitioning into typical guys that you would get as a Big Ten program in the Midwest? I don't know. I need to go dive into it more to learn more. But they recruited well in the Big Ten, and I don't necessarily want to call that a win because nothing came of it. I mean, they far underperformed from where they were recruiting in the conference. But
now you say that, I'm very curious to know, and there were several probably long list of reasons why it didn't work in Nebraska, but was it once that style, they didn't have the pieces for that style of offense, Frost just didn't really know what to do to adjust with them. And that's again, it goes back to what the fit might look like here, is that if you can get those guys to fit that system, you don't have to really worry about that whole adjustment period. But
so there was that article from The Athletic, which I think we talked about on the pod, of it was an anonymous coach who was with Frost both at UCF and Nebraska, which narrows it down in no way because that's like 40 different people, who they chalked it up to. They said that it was a culture problem, that they said that at UCF, were coming in from a team that was used to a very militaristic approach with George O'Leary. And they said the quote was that those guys just wanted to be loved and they just wanted to have fun again. And Frost's staff was very good at being, a player's coach and being friends with the players and really getting them to love the sport again and having fun together. And when they came into Nebraska, what the coach said is that Mike Riley had just tried that approach and it had failed. So they came in with kind of the same messaging. So they just kind of ended up with the same problems, was what that coach said. And I think that's interesting because I do think that sometimes a culture reset is needed, and Frost was the obvious pick, but I don't know, when that had just fallen on deaf ears of the, hey, I'm your buddy, let's all have fun together. Does it make sense to bring a new coach who goes, hey, I'm your buddy, let's all have fun together? I don't know.
And I also feel like there were instances at the time, and I'm maybe, I don't know if I can remember specific examples, but I felt like there were moments in his tenure where Frost tried to be the hard ass. And I don't think that really suited him.
Fell flat in a big way. Late in his tenure, he like flipped the switch on that, which I think he kind of had to at that point, and it backfired.
And I don't think that's who he is anyway. Like I just
no. I can't even imagine. Like, it's so funny. I remember there were little things when Gus first came. This is going to be the longest podcast we've ever done. We're not even close to being done. This is ridiculous. I'm so sorry, guys. When Gus first came to UCF, I remember there was this very small thing that when they were having those open practices in 2021 to get around COVID rules and get recruits in. So I, like a freak with several thousand other people, just showing up to watch them practice. And there were little things like a wide receiver misses a catch, he drops and does push-ups. And that's nothing unusual. And I saw that and was like, wow, because that's a big change from how things have been under Frost and under Heupel. And it just is little things like that. Circling back really quickly, I'm looking at Nebraska's 2019 recruiting class, which would have been the first full class under Frost, right? Because he left for the 2018 season. Yeah. It is almost entirely Midwestern guys. I'm looking at the top recruits: Kentucky, Nebraska, Minnesota, some Arizona guys, Oklahoma, Colorado, Nebraska, Iowa, Tennessee, New Jersey. Like, it's not the profile of guys he was recruiting at UCF. So it does seem like they very quickly switched up on, we need to get guys who would normally be coming to Nebraska.
I'm talking myself into this really working again.
Not good. It's not good.
Let's get another look at why this won't work, and we got to probably speed up through some of these.
We'll get going.
UCF's resource issues. We talked about how the resources in terms of the donations that have been generated in the 8 or 9 days since he was hired have been great, and he has more to work with than maybe another coach would have, like Barry Odom.
Yeah.
But UCF still has issues with resources that they're not anywhere close to overcoming.
Yeah, it's very frustrating to just learn just how poor UCF is. And I don't know enough of the backstory to understand why. It's actually, I'm getting, and some of you might be feeling this too, and I'm trying to not be overly critical because we don't know the backstory. I'm getting very flustered that it's like Terry Mahadra came into UCF. And this isn't a Terry thing. I'm just saying that Terry Mahadra came into UCF and it was 2021 and UCF was coming out of COVID. And they were in the G5 and they're getting $8 million a year from the AAC. And the whole thing, he was like, we are so poor. We desperately need money. We're trying so hard. We're in such a bad spot. And now somehow 4 years later, they're in the Big 12. They're still not full share members, but they got $18 million this past year. Ticket sales have been crazy. They've been selling out games like like you guys don't understand. Like the attendance these last few years where the team gets bad and the crowds are still sold out, that is new. Mm-hmm. And somehow we're still getting interviews with Terry saying, we are so poor. We have no money. We don't know what to do. And I'm just like, I'm getting flustered because I'm just like, as a fan, how many years am I supposed to swallow that pill of, oh man, we need money, we're so poor? It's getting old. And I don't fully know what the issue is. I know not being full share members, I understand that they're in the Big 12, they're not full share members, and that's hurting what they can do. And I know that the one team who's overcome that is BYU, who has just oodles of money to play with. So I get that, but I'm getting sick of it. And I'm hoping that is a temporary problem. I'm hoping when they've been full share members for a few years, they're going to have more of that money. But it's like, we're moving to rev share, and the whole talk is, oh, UCF just can't compete with rev share. And it's like, how many times do we have to hear this? Like, what has to change? UCF, I understand UCF's never going to be as rich as an Ohio State or an Alabama. How are they still not as rich as like an NC State or something, or a Georgia Tech? Like, how are they still not even on that level yet? How are they bottom of the barrel in the P4 still? That's what I'm getting flustered with.
It is frustrating, and it makes you kind of wish, and I don't know if you'd have to think it will be eventually, but we are now going into year 3 in the Big 12. When do they become full share members? Oh, okay, so it is next year.
Yep.
I don't know. Give it a decade. Like I would like to think like a decade of being full share members will help a lot of that, but we are in the early stages of it, and it does get old hearing over and over. We're poor. Oh, we just got like the biggest gift in program history, but we're still really poor. We're still really poor.
We swear we're going to build a lazy river next year.
What if Frost is like wondering where that thing is?
I bet Frost can't believe it's still a plan. Like, I bet the shock for him wasn't that it wasn't built. It's that they're still saying they're going to do it and trying to get money for it. But yeah, and that's not a Frost specific problem. It's just if you're talking about why it won't work, it was back before there was NIL. The sky was the limit for UCF in recruiting because of their location. And they could just pitch guys on coming in. Now that the NIL exists, like NIL hurt UCF. It was good for college football. It was horrible for UCF. It completely just took their legs out under them for recruiting. And Frost can be the most charismatic, player-friendly guy in the world and can assemble a staff that everyone loves to play for. And they'll get some guys because of that, but there will always be a cap on who they can get and who they can retain if they just can't find a way to be competitive. I'm not talking about compete with Alabama. Just have NC State money, have Georgia Tech money. Like, how are you not even there? That's where it gets frustrating.
Yeah.
All right, let's go.
Last thing on here, why it will work. The fan base has been rejuvenated by this, and it kind of goes along with the donor stuff, but it also and I don't know, we're going to say this and then we're going to get pushback from it because I believe a lot of you are crazy, but I believe there should, and there definitely should be, and I believe there will be a little more leeway early on with Frost, and that he'll be given some time to build this back up.
Yes.
I'm afraid of the reaction if what I believe should happen doesn't happen. But that is a reason why it could work, is because this is a project. This is, and he knows that, and that's why he said it in the press conference. Like, there's work to be done, and we've got a lot of work to do.
Let's go nightmare scenario. UCF goes 3-9 next year, which, guys, on the table. They beat Jacksonville State, they beat North Carolina A&T, and they beat a random Big 12 team somewhere. Sorry. I just got a text, so I'm just reading it really quickly. Adrian Medley is going to Florida State, apparently.
Okay, that doesn't surprise me.
But whatever, who cares? It doesn't affect us. I thought it was going to be something. We're fine. But anyway, they go 3-9. Sorry about that. They go 3-9. They win the 2 fake games. They beat some random Big 12 team. And if that is done this year with Scott Frost, fans will be upset. They will probably be discouraged to a degree, but there will be a lot of, it's Frost, we got to trust him. He's bringing in good guys. We like this recruiting class. This is all part of the process. That exact situation, but it had been they hired Barry Odom. The fan base is like, fire him now. This was a failure. Maybe Mahajer's job is on the line. Like, that's the difference. And that's where I think that it's an advantage for Frost, that the fan base is so behind him that this is going to be a time of struggle this next year. And I think that he is going to be given that time by the fan base where other coaches would not have been.
Yeah. Sorry, now I'm distracted by something. Actually, this was 2 hours ago. I don't know why I'm distracted by it. 3 hours ago. I don't know. Ohio State's freshman quarterback into the portal, and Kylan Fox quote tweeted it with a big smiley face because I think they were teammates.
Yes. Aaron Nolan. Also, I need to clarify, Adrian Medley is just visiting FSU. He set up a visit. I thought that was he's committed.
Well, he's still going.
Yes, he's going to FSU. We're just not sure if he's going to stay.
Yeah. I don't know. I wasn't really listening to what you were saying, but I'm sure it was all really great.
It was great. Yeah.
No, but it is. It's like the fan base is in on this, and you said that, like, worst case, like, say they go 3-9 next year. That's only one win less than they had this year. Yeah, and they did it this year with a roster we were sold on as being a contending roster. Next year, we know that it's going to be a pretty bare bones roster. If they finish 1 win shy of what they did this year with that type of roster, I'm not going to say I'm going to be encouraged, but I'm going to have, there's going to be a lot of grace there.
The schedule is also rough next year. Like, this was the easy one. They have to play North Carolina at a conference, and they have to go on the road in 5 of the 9 Big 12 games. So, like, based on what we know right now, and I will adjust this as they get players in and we learn about the rest of the conference, my prediction, like, gun to my head record, is probably like 4-8 for next year.
Yeah,
it's probably what
feels right.
But anyway,
last thing, why it won't work? Which one haven't we talked about? Oh, no players to bring in with him.
Yes.
And again, that kind of speaks to the roster being bare bones and not being able to bring along a quarterback who really liked playing for him, guys he recruited at a previous school. If he could bring Matthew Stafford from the Rams, that'd be cool, but he can't.
That'd be cool.
If we could bring, Cooper Kupp, Puka Nacua, all those guys, but it's just one of those things that he doesn't have the advantage of. That's where Barry Odom would have potentially had an advantage, and that even
that's where a lot of coaches would have had an advantage. Basically, everyone else they talk to, literally everyone else they talk to,
sitting head coaches or sitting coordinators.
Yes, that was far and away the biggest issue with hiring Frost was that.
Yeah, and it could be a temporary issue, but something that you had brought up to me was this could be one of those things where not having that is kind of going to dig them into a hole, and how difficult is it going to be to get out of that hole?
Yeah.
I don't know if he lives up to that kind of track record that he has with recruiting, it's something he can dig himself out of, but it takes kind of a few misses on recruiting classes to say, all right, this isn't working. We couldn't take, what happened to this program with the coach leaving and the whole portal, or the whole team going to the portal. We couldn't build back up from that, and it's not going to work.
Yeah. And that's what sucks too, is because also the way he's building his staff, with it largely being Nebraska guys, is he's not even bringing coordinators or assistants who have those connections to add players. I mean, UCF's in a unique position. There's a lot of schools, who have had coaching changes. There's a lot of schools who have a ton of players in the portal because of that. There aren't a lot that the new hire has zero connections. And I do worry that just sets UCF back, and that's just something they can't. I don't know. I'm not predicting that, but I do worry that they can't fully dig out of it because they're just so behind on it here with this roster.
Yeah.
And that's going to be tough.
And it's even, and I know this is a simple point to make, but it's even different. Like, obviously the UNC hired Bill Belichick, but when you're Bill Belichick coming into UNC with, no players to bring with you, your name is still Bill Belichick, and players are going to want to play for you. Also, you're at North Carolina. So it's a little different, and it's definitely a disadvantage, and we'll see how he deals with it. It's one of those things that we'll only know with time whether or not they can dig out of that.
Yep.
So, all right, that was fun. Let's move in. Quick football news, quick run. You already mentioned the Steve Cooper hiring and Sean Beckton staying on as UCF's associate head coach / wide receivers coach. Former UCF kicker Matthew Wright was named the AFC Special Teams Player of the Week. He hit that game-winning field goal for the Chiefs last Sunday night off the left upright and in. Chiefs luck, and then they let him go because Harrison Butker came back. And Matthew Wright, why he can't stick around somewhere, I don't really get, because every time he gets signed, he does well. But that's funny that he wins Special Teams Player of the Week, and it's like, all right, thanks for that, but go on back to your day job, kid. I'm realizing now that this is the first podcast since UNC did hire Bill Belichick. So I have in the notes in the news here that they did that, and that sets up a Frost-Belichick matchup in the Bounce House on September 20th. Insane sentence, insane graphic that UCF put out. That's a real thing that's happening.
I did love that they posted that graphic because there was no need for that, but it's just so insane that they were like, let's throw that out there, and it just looked ridiculous.
Yeah. And then the final thing, which is probably the biggest news, actually the biggest news of this week, RJ Harvey was voted an AP All-American, UCF's first All-American since Shaquem Griffin, and so well-deserved. And I just continue to be sad that the way the team around him sent him out as the best player on a 4-8 team when he deserves so much better.
Yep.
But
it's very frustrating.
Game of the week, real quick. UCF women's basketball. They're 7-2. They have one more non-conference game. I believe it's tomorrow against High Point. But the game of the week, they start Big 12 play on Saturday at 2:00 at home against number 12 TCU, who is 10-1. We saw a little bit of it last year with Coach Messer's team where they did well in non-conference. Then conference play came around and they just were not ready for it. So this is their first test. Obviously, it's a big test against a top 15 team, but we'll see kind of how they fare there and what we might be able to expect the rest of conference play. So we'll see how that goes. Tweet of the week.
Tweet of the week. Sometimes we have to do the thing where we give tweet of the week to someone that we like, and this is one of those times. Tweet of the week is going to go to Austin Heff for tweeting a thing earlier today. Space Knights fame. I'm sure you all know me for listening to this. I couldn't not call it out. I'm sorry. He was quote tweeting the news that Cam Moore and Derek LeBlanc are coming back to UCF. And he said, I wonder where the Frost Hire 8 crowd is today. So just two quick issues on that, and then we'll get out of here. The first one is, where is the Frost Ain't It crowd? I have not encountered these people. This has been like the most unanimous, everyone's happy, which that'll change once they start losing games. But I have not encountered this crowd if they do exist. I think it might be one account. And the other thing here is, look, I'm in on Frost, and I was not. I did not think they should in this hire. Nothing about bringing in two guys who have not played at all, getting them out of the portal is like, hell yeah. I mean, like Henderson twins, we will talk. We will talk if the Henderson twins come back. But yeah, two bench guys coming back is not that's not changing my opinion on really anything ever. So
yeah, that surprised me. I don't have anything else to say about it, but yeah, that was surprising.
To
have that reaction
against Frost, whoever you are. Gus Malzahn, I don't know. Someone's got to go against it somewhere.
Yeah, sure. Cool. We went very long today, but I don't know. I think we had a lot to talk about, and I thought it went really well. So pat ourselves on the back.
You're welcome, everybody.
We're patting ourselves on the back here. You're welcome for a great podcast, a long podcast. But we will be back next week just before Christmas. We're going to drop off a hopefully not super long podcast, but a Christmas present, if you will. Next week, we'll be back with episode 249. Until then, you can find us on Twitter at BaileyJAdams22, at @ByCASimmons, at Night Sports Now, and at Pegasus Podcast. Thank you guys so much for being with us, and we will talk to you next week.
Bye, everybody.